Experience the kinetic glow of a life in constant motion, where every choice creates a ripple that changes the world forever. Our 3D visuals capture the energy and the passion of those who lived every second to the absolute fullest. Subscribe today and feel the power of motion.
It was just past 3 in the morning when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I almost didn't answer it. I'd worked a double shift at the hospital that day. 12 hours on my feet, 2 codes, one family that screamed at me in the hallway because I couldn't tell them what they wanted to hear. I was the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes, the kind that makes your whole body feel like wet concrete. But I saw the name on the screen. My neighbor, Cindy. Cindy and I weren't close in the way people mean when they say close. We weren't brunching together on Sundays or texting each other memes. But she was the kind of neighbor you trusted. She'd watched my cat when I went to my sister's wedding in Phoenix. She always waved when we passed each other getting the mail. She was 53, lived alone since her divorce, had wind chimes on her porch that I used to find annoying and now found oddly comforting. Dependable. Quiet. Not the kind of person who called at 3 a.m. I picked up. "Don't turn your lights on." Her voice was barely above a breath. "Please, don't turn on any lights." I sat up in bed. The room was dark. I haven't turned anything on anyway, but suddenly that felt important. Suddenly, the darkness felt different. "Cindy?" I whispered back, though I didn't know why I was whispering. "What's happening?" There was a pause, long enough that I pulled the phone away to check if the call had dropped. It hadn't. "Just stay away from your windows," she said. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to call you like this. Just please don't go outside." Then she hung up. I sat there in the dark for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. My bedroom faces the street. There's one window and the curtains are thin, the kind I kept meaning to replace but never did because I liked the morning light. The street lamp outside casts an orange glow through the fabric all night. I'd slept next to that amber light for 6 years. I never thought about it until that moment, sitting in the dark after that phone call, when I suddenly became very aware that anyone standing on the sidewalk outside could probably see my silhouette if I moved. I didn't move. I set the phone down on the blanket and just listened. The house made its normal sounds, the refrigerator humming downstairs, the vent clicking as the heat came on. My cat, Biscuit, no wait, that name was taken, my cat, Fig, shifting on the foot of the bed. Everything was normal, everything sounded completely normal. And yet, I thought about calling Cindy back. I thought about calling 911. I thought about getting up and checking the locks, which I was almost certain I'd done before bed. Almost certain, but suddenly almost wasn't good enough. I picked up my phone and typed instead of calling, "Are you okay? What's going on?" The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "I can't explain right now. Please just stay inside and keep your lights off. I'll explain in the morning. I promise." I stared at the message. My thumbs hovered. "Are you safe?" I typed back. The dots. A long pause. "I think so. I'm in my basement." The basement. Her basement didn't have windows. I knew that because she mentioned it once. She thought about finishing it, turning it into a guest room, but there was no natural light and she couldn't stand the idea of a guest room that felt like a cell. Why was she in her basement at 3 a.m.? I set the phone down and I did what I told myself not to do. I got out of bed. I told myself I was just going to check the lock on my front door. That was reasonable. That was practical. That was the kind of thing anyone would do after a phone call like that. I wasn't going to look outside. I was just going to check the deadbolt, confirm it was engaged, and go back to bed. The stairs creaked under my feet. I always forgot how loud they were at night. The front door was locked, both the handle and the deadbolt. I stood there with my hand on the metal for a second, feeling its coldness, and then I exhaled. I started back toward the stairs. That's when I heard it. Not from outside. From the back of my house. A sound like something catching, like a latch that didn't quite seat properly. The kind of sound a door makes when it's almost closed but not fully pulled shut. I froze at the bottom of the stairs. I have a back door. It opens into a small yard that's fenced in, wood privacy fence, 6 feet tall. I use that door constantly in summer because I like to sit out there in the evening. but in winter, I barely touch it. The patio furniture was already put away for the season. I thought about the last time I'd used that door. The week before, maybe, when I dragged a bag of recycling to the bin. Had I locked it? I locked the handle. Did I engage the deadbolt? I stood at the bottom of the stairs and I could not remember. My phone was upstairs. Fig had followed me down and was now winding between my ankles, which in any other context would be sweet. Right now it meant I was going to trip if I moved too fast. I moved slowly. I walked through the living room, through the kitchen, toward the back hallway. The house was dark and I kept it that way, one hand trailing along the wall. The back door came into view. The handle deadbolt was not engaged. I could see the little lever on the lock, the one you turn to activate it. It was horizontal, unlocked. Just the handle lock, which any credit card could defeat if someone knew what they were doing. My hand found the deadbolt. I turned it. It moved stiffly, the way it always did in cold weather, and made a sound that in the silence of my house at 3 a.m. felt like a gunshot. I stepped back from the door and tried to breathe. There was a small window in the back hallway, set into the wall next to the door, narrow, more decorative than functional. I had frosted curtains over it, the kind you can't see through from inside or outside. But someone standing on my back porch would be 3 feet from where I was standing. I thought, go get your phone. Call 911. That's the reasonable thing. That's what you should do. I didn't move. Because I heard something on the other side of that door. Not loud. If there had been any other sound in the house, the refrigerator, the vent, anything, I might not have heard it at all. But the house was completely still and I was holding my breath. And in that silence, I heard the sound of someone shifting their weight on my back porch. The faint compression of a floorboard that was slightly soft near the railing. Someone was standing outside my back door. I backed down the hallway. 1 step, 2, eyes on the frosted window, watching for any change in the light behind it. Fig followed me, silent, and I was grateful for once that she was not the kind of cat who meowed when she wanted attention. I made it to the kitchen. I made it to the stairs. I took them 2 at a time, and I didn't care how loud they were, and I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and called Cindy. She answered on the first ring, which told me she'd been sitting there with the phone in her hand. "The someone on my back porch," I whispered. I heard them. A sharp intake of breath. Oh, God. Okay, listen to me. "Cindy, who is it? What is going on?" She stopped. The pause felt like it had weight to it. "It's my ex-husband, I think. I'm not completely sure, but I think there are 2 of them. 2. "He called me earlier," she said, and her voice was starting to shake. "Before I went to bed. He was angry. It doesn't matter what he said. I didn't take it seriously enough. I should have. I've been in my basement for an hour because I saw a shadow pass my front window and I know his walk. I know how he moves." "Did you call the police?" "I called you first. I don't know why I called you first. I'm sorry." "Cindy." I kept my voice as steady as I could. "Call 911 right now. Do it right now. Tell them there are intruders. Give them both our addresses. Do you understand me?" A small sound, something between yes and a sob. "Okay. I'm going to stay on the line with you." "Okay." I looked around my bedroom. I had a lamp with a heavy base on my dresser. I had a field hockey stick in the back of my closet from a league I'd played in 3 years ago that I never got around to throwing out. I am not someone who owns a firearm. I have colleagues who do, and I have always understood their reasoning, and that night, crouched in the corner of my bedroom between the dresser and the wall, holding a field hockey stick, I understood their reasoning in a completely different and much more immediate way. I could hear Cindy on the phone with dispatch. I could hear her giving the address, her voice climbing in pitch as the dispatcher asked her questions. The back of my house was quiet. No more sounds from the porch. That was almost worse. Before, I'd known where the sound was coming from. Now I didn't know anything. I heard something then that made my stomach drop. My phone lit up with a text, unknown number. "We know you're home. We can see your car in the driveway. Just stay calm and this doesn't have to be a problem." I read it twice, 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. They had my number. Whoever was outside had my phone number, which meant this wasn't random, which meant they planned this, which meant someone had given it to them or they'd found it somewhere, and either way it meant they knew who I was before they stood on my porch tonight. I thought about Cindy's ex-husband. I'd never met him. She'd left him 4 years ago before I moved in. She'd mentioned him occasionally, the way you mention something you're glad is behind you. Briefly, without looking directly at it. She'd said once that the divorce had been hard. I hadn't asked for details. I wished I had. I typed back to Cindy. I got a text from an unknown number. They said they can see my car. I think they have my number somehow. Her response came fast. His nephew, he does that kind of thing, finding information. I'm so sorry I didn't warn you sooner. The dispatcher was still on with Cindy. I could hear a voice saying units were on the way, ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes. I looked at the field hockey stick in my hands. The text from the unknown number hadn't come again. I didn't respond to it. I don't know if that was the right call. I only know that responding felt like confirming I was there, alone, scared, and I didn't want to give them that. The 12 minutes felt like a different unit of time than the 12 minutes I knew from normal life. At work, 12 minutes is half a procedure. It's the time between checking on a patient and checking again. It passes. At 3 a.m. in a dark bedroom with a field hockey stick, 12 minutes is an era. Fig jumped onto the bed. I almost screamed. I pressed my back harder against the wall and watched the door to my bedroom and listened. At some point, I think it was around minute 7 or 8, I heard voices. Outside, distant, coming from the direction of the street. I couldn't make out words, just tone. There were 2 of them, and they were not being careful about their volume anymore, which felt significant, though I couldn't have said exactly why. Then I heard nothing for a long time. Then I heard the most beautiful sound I have ever heard, which was a car door and then another car door, and then a third in quick succession, and the red and blue light that flickered through my thin curtains and threw strange shadows across my bedroom ceiling. I waited until I heard a knock on my front door, and a voice saying, "Police, anyone inside, please come to the door," and then I put down the field hockey stick, and I walked downstairs on legs that weren't quite steady, and I opened the door. There were 2 officers. A woman and a man, both young, both with that particular expression trained professionals wear when they're trying to communicate calm. Behind them, on the sidewalk, I could see more activity. Flashlights moving along the side of the house, someone talking into a radio. "Are you the resident?" the woman asked. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I live here alone." They came inside. They walked through the house with me and checked every room and every lock and every closet. They told me that officers had found 2 individuals in the alley that ran behind our houses. They were being detained. They would need a statement from me. I sat down at my kitchen table and gave it. It took about 40 minutes. During that time, another officer drove Cindy from her house to mine. She came in through my front door, wrapped in a coat she'd clearly grabbed in a hurry, her hair down, her face the color of notebook paper. She sat down across from me at the table, and we looked at each other for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "I should have told you more on the phone. You were scared." I was scared and I wasn't thinking clearly, and I called you before I called anyone who could actually help because... She stopped. Her hands were flat on my table, pressing down like she was trying to keep something from rising up through the wood. "Because you felt safe. Calling you felt like the one thing I could do that might make it better, even a little." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, and she didn't pull away. The officers explained what they pieced together. Her ex-husband, his name doesn't matter. I choose not to give him any more space in the story than he already took, had driven in from out of state. He'd been angry about something related to a property dispute that was still unresolved from their divorce. His nephew had come with him. The nephew was the one who'd found my number, apparently through a neighborhood directory that our HOA had published a few years back, the kind that lists your name, address, and phone number, and that I'd never thought twice about until that night. They hadn't broken in. They hadn't touched either of our doors. Legally, what they'd done existed in a gray area that the officers explained to us carefully and somewhat apologetically. Trespassing, harassment, possibly criminal threatening, depending on that text. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't the clear-cut case you'd hope for. Cindy already had a lawyer. She'd been dealing with the property dispute for 2 years, and her attorney knew the full history. She called him at 5 in the morning and he answered, which told me he'd been waiting for something like this for longer than she had. I stayed up until dawn. I made coffee that I didn't finish. I sat on my couch with Fig in my lap and watched the light change outside my window, the sky going from black to that particular blue that exists for about 20 minutes before the sun actually rises. And I thought about how thin the distance is between a normal night and a night that changes things. I think about that a lot now. I still live in that house. I got heavier curtains, the blackout kind, which I'd always avoided because I was so attached to the morning light. It turns out I'm more attached to sleeping through the night without wondering what's on the other side of the glass. I got a deadbolt on the back door that requires a key from both sides. I got a doorbell camera and a floodlight for the backyard. I got a lockbox for the HOA directory, and I wrote a letter asking them to take the online version down, which after some back and forth they did. I also got closer with Cindy. She comes over for coffee now on Sunday mornings, which I would have found unlikely 6 months ago. She's working through the property dispute, and it looks like it will resolve in her favor. She got a restraining order. She's sleeping better, she says. Me too, I tell her. Most nights. There's a particular fear that comes from learning in the middle of the night that someone knows your address and your phone number, and the fact that you live alone and the make of your car in the driveway, and that they're standing outside using all of that information. It doesn't leave cleanly. It leaves residue. You find it in small moments. The way you double-check the back door before bed now, the way your heart does something small and unpleasant when an unknown number calls late at night, the way you've memorized exactly which floorboard on your back porch makes that sound. But here's the thing that stays with me most. Cindy called me before she called anyone else, not because I could do the most to help her. I couldn't. Not because I had resources she didn't. I didn't. She called me because she needed to hear a voice she trusted, and in whatever way two people who mostly wave at each other over the mailbox can build that kind of trust, we had built it. I think about the years I spent in that house being pleasantly distant from the people around me, cordial, neighborly in the technical sense, and I think about what it cost her, and almost cost us both. That I didn't know about her divorce, didn't know the details she'd glossed over, didn't know there was a long dispute still simmering 4 years after she'd thought she was done with all of it. I can't change that. What I can do is what I do now, which is actually know my neighbors, their names and their situations and the things they're navigating, the uncomfortable stuff they tend to leave out because they don't want to burden anyone. I ask. I've gotten better at asking. It's a small thing. It's the kind of small thing that probably sounds obvious when you say it out loud. But I didn't used to do it, and now I do, and that feels like the part of the story worth keeping. I've thought about that night more times than I can count, not in a way that keeps me up anymore. That part has mostly passed, but in the way you return to something after the fear is gone and you can finally see the whole shape of it clearly. What strikes me now is how many small choices stacked on top of each other to get us both to that point. Cindy staying quiet about her divorce because she didn't want to be the neighbor with a complicated history. Me never asking because I didn't want to pry. An HOA directory that nobody questioned. A backdoor deadbolt I couldn't quite remember locking. None of those things were catastrophic on their own. All of them together, on the same night, nearly were. I think that's how most bad situations actually work. Not one dramatic failure, but a quiet accumulation of small inattentions. The lesson isn't to live in a state of constant vigilance. That's exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. The lesson is to know the difference between distance that's polite and distance that leaves you blind. Cindy called me that night because in some way I'd earned a small piece of her trust without either of us fully realizing it. The waves over the mailbox. The cat sitting. The fact that I'd never once given her a reason to doubt me. That foundation, built from nothing more dramatic than showing up consistently as a decent person, is what made her reach for her phone and dial my number when she was terrified and in her basement and trying to figure out who she could trust. That's not a small thing. That's actually the whole thing. I think about the clarity I found in those 12 minutes between units are on the way and the moment I heard car doors outside. When you are sitting in the corner of a dark room holding a field hockey stick and waiting, you are not thinking about the petty frustrations of your week. You are not thinking about the things you said that you wish you could take back, or the promotion you didn't get, or the argument you had with your sister 3 months ago that you never fully resolved. You are thinking about what matters. The list is very short and very obvious, and you wonder afterward why it ever seemed complicated. What I found in that corner of my bedroom was not courage in the dramatic sense. I was scared. My hands were shaking badly enough that I nearly dropped my phone twice. But I stayed calm enough to think, and I made the decisions I needed to make, and I did not fall apart until later when I was safe and the coffee was going cold and the sun was starting to come up. That kind of steadiness, the kind that holds you together not because you're fearless, but because you've decided that falling apart is not an option right now. That's something you don't know you have until you need it. I know it now. And I know that it came from somewhere. It came from years of learning to function under pressure in difficult rooms with frightened people. It came from understanding at some fundamental level that panicking transfers nothing useful to anyone and costs you everything. That's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill. You build it slowly, one hard shift at a time, one difficult conversation at a time, until one night at 3 a.m., it turns out to be exactly what you needed. Cindy and I drink coffee together on Sunday mornings now. She talks about her lawyer and I talk about work. And sometimes we sit quietly and that's fine too. We know each other in the real way now. The way that includes the hard parts, the history, the things we'd rather not have to explain. I think that's what this whole thing gave me. Not just better locks and heavier curtains, a real neighbor, the kind worth having.